Industrial farms produce food using fertilizer, that when it rains in large quantities, the water causes nutrients to be deposited in open bodies of water. This water, with excess nutrients, is now a fertile ground for red tide growth. Red tide is an algae that forms in warm ocean temperatures, low salinity, and high nutrient content. The fertilizer used in industrial farming is perfect for creating such conditions. This is an externality that farms producing this food are not paying a cost for. The fishing industry, on the other hand, will pay the external cost created by the farming industry because the red tide releases a toxin that kills and harms ocean organisms like fish. The excessive runoff is not socially optimal quantity of pollution because the red tide causes the fishing industry The excessive runoff is not the socially optimal quantity of pollution because the fishing industry and others would prefer that little to no nutrient runoff would occur. The marginal social cost of this pollution is the loss of fish as a food source in regions that are adjacent to large industrial farms or are downstream of them, as well as a loss of fish diversity and tourism in areas by the water. The marginal social benefit of this pollution is that more food is produced using less people or labor while using fertilizers. For a graphic. Red tide is hideous, and it's horrifying and expansive, and it releases the toxin that kills many don't know how that got there. Many fish.
On the graph of the market failure observed during red tide, we see that people using fertilizers and causing a worsened red tide shift supply to the left. This creates the new socially optimal level, labeled by points PS and QS, and the new supply line becomes the marginal social cost, and the dead weight loss is shaded in the middle of the graph.
An immediate solution to this problem is, of course, cutting off the use of fertilizer. But the cost of no fertilizer is that the industrial farms will lose much of the efficiency that allows the modern world to exist. Just think of the quantity of food that we give to other countries, and you will understand that this solution does not satisfy everyone. I would suggest managing runoff better, maybe on a mass scale, creating rules and restrictions that call for farms to designate large sections of land around the farm to dig trenches that lead to a local area that would be a ditch, with a modified, specifically to deal with water, sanitary landfill, designed to let water evaporate but leave behind the materials that collect in runoff, like the salt and the nutrients in the fertilizer. This route of fixing the problem would be super expensive to create, but it would allow advanced countries to keep farming the massive numbers of food for the benefit of the world. This solution does not internalize the externality, but unless it calls for farms to pay a serious fine for whenever the water landfill gets flooded or is not properly cleaned out after a storm, there would likely need to be an organization that must oversee this across the country, probably government-derived, like the FDA, so it probably wouldn't be as, closely connected to the government, but it would still be government-driven.